The advertisement appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle on a humid morning in July of 1883. A simple sketch of a woman's face drawn with hesitant pencil strokes that barely captured what the artist intended. Xavier Gallagher held the crumpled newspaper in his calloused hands, squinting at the faded illustration while the stagecoach rattled beneath him, carrying him away from the California goldfields and toward the dusty promise of Nevada. The woman in the sketch had delicate features, a small nose and eyes that seemed almost apologetic in their simplicity. But what caught his attention was the text below announcing that Miss Sophia Ashford sought correspondence for potential matrimony, currently residing in Eldorado Canyon, Nevada, where she worked as a schoolteacher for the miners' children. Xavier had spent 3 years breaking his back in the Sierra Nevada mountains, panning for gold that never materialized into anything more than enough to survive another month. At 26 years old, his body already bore the marks of hard labor, his hands scarred and roughened, his shoulders broad from swinging pickaxes and hauling equipment. He had watched other men receive letters from wives and sweethearts back east, had seen the way their faces softened when they read words of love and longing, and something in him had finally cracked open with want. He was tired of sleeping on hard ground, tired of the endless cycle of hope and disappointment that defined a prospector's life, tired of being alone in a world that seemed to demand partnership for survival. The sketch was poor quality. He knew that much. Whoever had drawn it possessed limited artistic skill, and the newspaper's printing process had degraded the image further until the woman's features blurred into suggestion rather than definition. But Xavier found himself staring at it anyway, imagining what she might truly look like. What kind of woman would advertise herself in a newspaper? What circumstances had brought her to such a desperate measure? He understood desperation intimately. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Eldorado Canyon 3 days later, Xavier's entire body ached from the journey. The town sprawled along the Colorado River, a collection of rough wooden buildings and canvas tents that housed the workers from the nearby mines. The Tecaticup mine dominated the local economy, its operations drawing men from across the country with promises of silver and gold, though Xavier had learned not to trust such promises anymore. He had saved enough money for a small stake, enough to start something different, something that did not involve crawling into the earth and praying it would not collapse on him. The July heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight, turning the air thick and difficult to breathe. Xavier made his way to the boarding house first, securing a room that cost more than seemed reasonable for 4 walls and a lumpy mattress, then asked the proprietor about the schoolteacher. The man, a grizzled fellow with more beard than face, gestured vaguely toward the eastern edge of town where a small whitewashed building stood apart from the saloons and gambling halls. Xavier's heart hammered against his ribs as he approached the schoolhouse. Through the open windows he could hear a woman's voice, clear and patient, guiding children through their arithmetic lessons. He waited outside, suddenly uncertain, clutching his hat in his hands and feeling foolish. What was he doing here? What made him think a woman who advertised for a husband would want him? A failed prospector with dirt under his fingernails and $23 to his name. The children burst from the schoolhouse when lessons ended, a chaotic stream of energy and noise that scattered in all directions. Xavier stepped aside to let them pass, and then she appeared in the doorway, and every thought in his head went silent. Sophia Ashford bore almost no resemblance to the sketch in the newspaper. Where the drawing suggested plainness, the reality revealed something far more striking. She stood average height, with rich chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face in the heat. Her eyes were not the undefined dots of the sketch, but a remarkable shade of green that seemed to shift in the sunlight, and her features, while not conventionally perfect, possessed a symmetry and warmth that the artist had completely failed to capture. She wore a simple calico dress, faded from washing but clean and carefully mended, and when she noticed Xavier standing there, her expression shifted from tired contentment to cautious curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying the educated accent of someone raised back east, perhaps Boston or Philadelphia. Xavier found his voice after a moment of struggle. "Miss Ashford, my name is Xavier Gallagher. I saw your advertisement in the San Francisco paper." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been embarrassment or resignation. She glanced around the empty schoolyard, then back at him. "I see. Would you like to come inside, Mr. Gallagher? We should talk properly." The schoolhouse interior smelled of chalk dust and children, of books and fresh air from the open windows. Sophia gestured to one of the larger benches, and they sat with careful distance between them. Xavier could not stop looking at her, could not reconcile the faded sketch with this living, breathing woman who seemed to carry entire worlds behind those green eyes. "The drawing does not look much like you," he said, then immediately wished he could take the words back. But Sophia laughed, a sound that transformed her whole face. "No, it does not. My friend Martha attempted the portrait, bless her heart, but she has more skill with needlework than drawing. I could not afford to hire a proper artist, and the newspaper required some kind of image for the advertisement." She folded her hands in her lap, and Xavier noticed how delicate they were, though marred with chalk dust and small scars. "I suppose I should have mentioned her lack of talent in artistic matters. Why did you place the advertisement?" Xavier asked, surprising himself with his directness. Sophia's smile faded, and she looked toward the window where dust motes danced in the afternoon light. "Because I am 23 years old, unmarried, and living in a mining town where decent men are scarce and indecent ones are plentiful. Because I came west 3 years ago to escape an arranged marriage in Philadelphia, and I have built a life here teaching these children. But the mine owners have made it clear that they prefer a married woman in this position. They believe a single woman is too much temptation for their workers." Her voice carried bitterness now. "Because I am tired of being alone, if I am honest, and because the alternative is returning east in defeat." Xavier understood every word. "I left the goldfields because I was tired of breaking my back for nothing. I want land, a home, something to build instead of something to dig up and destroy. I have $23, a strong back, and a willingness to work hard at whatever I can find. I am not educated like you, but I can read and write well enough. I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble, and I have never raised my hand to a woman or child." He paused, searching for more to offer, some quality that might make him seem worthy. "I am not much, but I am honest." "Honesty is more than most men offer," Sophia said quietly. She studied him with an intensity that made him want to squirm, but he held her gaze. "What did you think when you saw the sketch?" "I thought you looked kind," Xavier admitted. "I thought maybe you were plain, but that did not matter to me. I have been told I am not much to look at myself." This was not quite true. Xavier knew women had always found him handsome enough, with his dark hair and blue eyes, his strong jaw and tall frame, but years of hard labor and harder living had weathered him beyond his years. "You are wrong about that," Sophia said, and color rose in her cheeks as if she had not meant to speak the thought aloud. "I mean, you seem perfectly presentable." They sat in awkward silence for a moment, both aware of the strangeness of this conversation. this meeting between two people who knew nothing of each other except mutual need. Then, Sophia stood and moved to her desk, retrieving a small packet of letters tied with string. "I received 14 responses to my advertisement," she said, holding up the bundle. "Most were crude or clearly written by men who could barely string sentences together. 3 seemed promising, and I wrote back to all 3, asking them to visit if they were serious in their intentions. You are the first to arrive." Xavier felt something shift in his chest, some combination of hope and competition. "Will you wait for the others?" "I do not know," Sophia said honestly. "That hardly seems fair to you, does it?" "But neither does it seem wise to make such an important decision based on one conversation." She returned to the bench, closer this time, and Xavier caught the scent of lavender soap and chalk dust. "Perhaps we could spend some time together over the next few days. Get to know each other before making any commitments. Would that be acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Xavier said. "I do not want to rush you into anything. This is too important for rushing." They agreed to meet the following evening for dinner at the boarding house, and Xavier left the schoolhouse feeling as if he had just survived the most important negotiation of his life. As he walked back through town, he found himself grinning like a fool. The real woman was so much more than the faded sketch had promised. She was intelligent and direct, vulnerable and strong, beautiful in ways that no drawing could have captured. He wanted to know everything about her, wanted to hear her laugh again, wanted to prove himself worthy of whatever chance she might give him. The next 24 hours passed with excruciating slowness. Xavier spent the time securing work at one of the local ranches that supplied beef to the mining operations. The pay was decent, and the ranch owner, a weathered man named Tom Fletcher, seemed impressed with Xavier's experience handling livestock from his childhood in Texas. By the time evening arrived, Xavier had earned $2 and the promise of steady work if he wanted it. He cleaned up as best he could, scrubbing away the day's dirt and sweat, changing into his only good shirt. When he arrived at the boarding house dining room, Sophia was already there, wearing a dress of deep blue that brought out the green in her eyes. She had left her hair down, and it fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and Xavier thought he had never seen anything more lovely. Dinner was simple fare, beef stew and cornbread, but Xavier barely tasted it. They talked through the entire meal, trading stories of their lives with the eager awkwardness of people desperate to connect. Sophia told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, daughter of a banker who had arranged her marriage to a business associate's son, a man twice her age who treated women as property to be acquired. She spoke of her escape west, traveling with a widow who needed a companion, the terror and exhilaration of leaving everything she knew behind. She described her first year teaching in a tent while the schoolhouse was built, the challenges of educating children who spoke half a dozen different languages, the satisfaction of watching them learn despite the harsh conditions. Xavier shared his own history, growing up on a failed ranch in Texas, his father's death from snakebite when Xavier was 15, his mother's remarriage to a man who made it clear there was no place for him in their home. He talked about his years drifting from job to job, cowhand to railroad worker to prospector, always searching for something he could not quite name. He admitted his loneliness, the way he had watched other men build families while he remained alone, convinced that he had nothing to offer a woman beyond hard work and good intentions. "Good intentions and hard work are more valuable than gold," Sophia said, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. The contact sent electricity through Xavier's entire body. Most people have neither. They met again the next evening and the evening after that. Xavier found himself sharing things he had never told another soul, and Sophia opened up in turn, revealing her fears and hopes with a trust that humbled him. On the fourth evening, they walked along the Colorado River as the sun set, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and red that seemed impossible in their intensity. "No one else has come," Sophia said as they stood watching the water flow past. "The other two men who responded to my letter. I do not think they are coming. Their loss," Xavier said firmly, "though I am grateful for it." Sophia turned to face him, and in the fading light her eyes seemed luminous. "I need to be honest with you about something, Xavier. I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of making a mistake, of choosing wrong, of ending up trapped in something worse than loneliness." She wrapped her arms around herself despite the lingering heat. "When I saw that sketch in the paper, I was horrified. Martha meant well, but it made me look so plain, so unremarkable. I thought no one would respond, or only the most desperate men would answer. But then your letter arrived, and it was so honest, so straightforward. You did not make grand promises or try to impress me with exaggerations. You just told me who you were and what you wanted." "That is all I know how to be," Xavier said. "I know. That is what makes this so frightening." Sophia looked up at him, and Xavier could see tears glistening in her eyes. "Because I find myself caring for you, Xavier Gallagher. In just 4 days, I have come to care for you in a way that seems impossible and yet completely real. And I am terrified that this feeling is one-sided, or that it will not last, or that I am fooling myself because I am desperate." Xavier reached for her hand, holding it gently in his own. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw you? I thought the universe had played a trick on me. I thought I had chosen you based on a poor sketch, expecting someone plain and ordinary, and instead, you appeared like something from a dream. I spent that whole first evening convinced you would realize you could do better than a washed-up prospector with nothing to his name." "You are not nothing," Sophia whispered. "I know that now, because you see me as something more." Xavier drew her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I am falling in love with you, Sophia. Maybe I was already halfway there when I saw that faded sketch and imagined kindness in those poorly drawn eyes. But seeing the real you, knowing the real you, has made me certain. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." "Xavier," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded with equal passion. The kiss held all the loneliness of their separate lives, all the hope for something better, all the tentative joy of two people finding each other against impossible odds. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Sophia laughed through her tears. "That faded sketch was the worst and best thing I ever did. Worst because it was terrible, best because somehow it brought you to me." "Marry me," Xavier said. "Not because you need a husband to keep your teaching position, not because you are afraid of being alone. Marry me because when I picture my future, I cannot imagine it without you in it." "Yes," Sophia said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed 2 weeks later in the small church that served Eldorado Canyon's faithful. The ceremony was simple, attended by Sophia's fellow teachers and some of the families whose children she taught. Xavier wore his best clothes, though they were modest, and Sophia wore a dress of cream-colored linen that she had sewn herself, working late into the night by lamplight. Tom Fletcher stood as Xavier's witness, and Martha, the friend whose poor artistic skills had started everything, stood as Sophia's, dabbing at her eyes throughout the ceremony. Xavier had used his savings to rent a small house on the edge of town, 2 rooms with a kitchen and a real floor instead of packed dirt. It was not much, but Sophia had gasped with delight when he showed her, immediately seeing potential in the bare walls and empty spaces. They spent their first week of marriage fixing up their home. Xavier building furniture from scrap lumber, while Sophia sewed curtains and arranged their few possessions into something that felt like permanence. The physical intimacy of marriage came naturally to them both, surprising Xavier with its intensity. He had been with women before, brief encounters that left him feeling more lonely than satisfied, but with Sophia, everything was different. She came to their marriage bed with nervousness, but also trust, and Xavier took his time, learning her body's responses, discovering what brought her pleasure. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate in equal measure, and afterward, they would lie tangled together in the darkness, talking about their dreams for the future. Xavier continued working at the Fletcher Ranch, his responsibilities growing as he proved his competence with horses and cattle. Tom Fletcher had no sons, and he began training Xavier in all aspects of ranch management, hinting that there might be a partnership opportunity in the future if Xavier proved himself. Meanwhile, Sophia continued teaching, her position now secure with her married status, though she chafed at the injustice of that requirement. "It makes no sense," she complained one evening as they sat together on their small porch, watching the sun set over the canyon. "I am the same teacher I was before we married, the same person with the same skills. Why should my marital status matter?" "Because people are afraid of what they do not understand," Xavier said, his arm around her shoulders. A single woman in a mining town challenges their ideas about how the world should work. It is not right, but it is how they think. "Then we need to change how they think," Sophia said fiercely. "I have been talking to some of the other women in town. We want to start a lending library, a place where anyone can borrow books and learn. Most of these miners have no education beyond what they picked up as children, if that. Imagine what they could accomplish with access to knowledge." Xavier loved watching her passion ignite, the way her whole body came alive when she talked about teaching and learning. "What do you need to make this happen?" "Money, mostly. Books are expensive and we need a space to house them. I thought perhaps we could use part of the schoolhouse, but the mine owners have been resistant." She sighed, frustration evident in every line of her body. "They do not see the value in educating their workers beyond what is necessary for the job." "Then we will find another way," Xavier promised. "We will save up, find a space, start small and grow. If there is one thing I have learned from watching you, it is that determination can move mountains." Over the next several months, they worked toward that goal. Xavier took on extra work whenever possible, and Sophia began offering evening classes to miners who wanted to improve their reading and writing, charging a small fee that went into their library fund. The work was exhausting, leaving them both drained at the end of each day, but they found strength in their partnership, in the knowledge that they were building something together. Winter came to Eldorado Canyon, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that dusted the canyon walls with white. Xavier and Sophia huddled together for warmth, their small house cozy despite its size. On Christmas Eve, Xavier presented Sophia with a gift he had been working on for weeks, a bookshelf he had built from fine wood he had purchased with carefully saved money. The craftsmanship was rough but sturdy, each joint carefully fitted, each surface sanded smooth. Sophia cried when she saw it, running her hands over the wood in wonder. "It is beautiful, Xavier. It is perfect. For our library," he said. "The beginning of it, anyway. We will fill it with books, and then we will build more shelves, and someday we will have a whole building full of them." "How did I get so lucky?" Sophia asked, pulling him close. "That faded sketch could have brought anyone to my door, but it brought you." "I think I am the lucky one," Xavier murmured against her hair. I picked you from a newspaper based on a terrible drawing, and I got something so much better than I deserved." "We both got what we deserved," Sophia corrected. "We both deserve to be happy." Spring of 1884 brought changes to Eldorado Canyon. The Tecaticup mine hit a new vein of ore, bringing a surge of new workers and increased prosperity to the town. With that prosperity came new problems, including increased tensions between the miners and the mine owners over working conditions and pay. Xavier found himself caught in the middle, his position at the ranch giving him perspective on both sides of the conflict. One evening in April, he came home to find Sophia pacing their small front room, agitated in a way he had never seen before. "What happened?" he asked immediately, fear clutching at his chest. "One of my students, Tommy Henderson. His father was killed in the mine today." A tunnel collapse that should never have happened. The supports were bad, everyone knew they were bad, but the owners refused to pay for proper reinforcement. Tears streamed down her face. "That boy is 9 years old, Xavier. 9 years old, and now he has no father because some man in an office decided that safety was not worth the cost." Xavier pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake with rage and grief. "Where is Tommy now?" "With his mother. She has 3 other children, the youngest just a baby." "How are they supposed to survive?" Sophia pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "We have to do something. This cannot keep happening." Over the next week, Sophia became involved in organizing support for the Henderson family and pushing for improved safety measures in the mines. She attended community meetings, circulated petitions, and used her position as teacher to speak with authority about the impact of mining accidents on families. Xavier supported her efforts while watching nervously as she drew the attention and ire of the mine owners. His fears were realized when the mine superintendent, a cold-eyed man named William Thorpe, confronted Sophia outside the schoolhouse one afternoon. Xavier happened to be passing by and heard the raised voices, arriving in time to hear Thorpe threatening to have her fired if she continued stirring up trouble among the workers. "You will do no such thing," Xavier said, stepping between Thorpe and his wife. He was taller than the superintendent and broader, and he used that physical presence now without shame. "My wife has every right to speak her mind about safety concerns. Those men who died left behind families, children who sit in her classroom. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me." Thorpe's face flushed with anger. "And who are you to speak to me this way? Some cowhand who thinks he is important because he married the schoolteacher. I am her husband, and I will not let you intimidate her. The deaths in that mine are on your head, Thorpe. Everyone in this town knows it. The question is whether you are going to do something about the conditions before more men die, or whether you are going to keep threatening women who speak the truth." For a moment, Xavier thought Thorpe might actually take a swing at him, and he was prepared for that outcome. But the superintendent backed down, perhaps aware of the small crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation. "This is not over," he said, pointing a finger at both of them. "You people need to learn your place." After Thorpe stalked away, Xavier turned to find Sophia watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "Are you angry with me?" he asked. "Angry? No. I am grateful, though I wish I could have handled him myself. But mostly." She took his hand, squeezing it tight. "Mostly I am in awe of you. You could have lost your job standing up to him like that. Tom Fletcher does business with the mine." "Some things are more important than a job," Xavier said firmly. "You are more important. What you are doing is important." "I meant what I said in our vows, Sophia. For better or worse. If standing up to bullies like Thorpe means the worse, then so be it." That night, they made love with a fierce intensity, as if reaffirming their commitment to each other in the face of outside threats. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Sophia whispered, "I love you more every day. I did not think that was possible, but it is." "I know," Xavier said. "I feel the same way. When I saw that sketch, I thought maybe I could find companionship, someone to share the load of life with. But this is so much more than that. You are my partner in everything, my best friend, the person who makes me want to be better than I am." The conflict with the mine owners escalated over the following weeks, but it also brought the community together. The miners held meetings to discuss organizing for better conditions, and Sophia's lending library project received unexpected support from workers who wanted their children to have opportunities beyond the mines. Donations poured in, both money and books, and by June, they had enough to rent a small storefront on Main Street. The library opened on a blazing hot day in mid-July, exactly 1 year after Xavier had first arrived in Eldorado Canyon. The single room held 5 bookshelves now, 3 purchased and 2 built by Xavier himself, filled with a mix of novels, textbooks, agricultural manuals, and newspapers. Sophia organized everything with meticulous care, creating a system where people could borrow books by signing their names in a ledger. The response overwhelmed them both, miners and their families streaming through the door to marvel at the collection, many checking out their first books ever. Xavier stood in the corner, watching Sophia help a young miner select a book about horse breeding, and felt something profound settle in his chest. This was what purpose felt like, he realized. Not just his own individual purpose, but shared purpose, building something meaningful with someone he loved. The faded sketch that had brought him here seemed like a lifetime ago, that crude approximation of the woman he now knew in all her complexity and strength. Tom Fletcher made good on his hints about partnership that autumn, offering Xavier a 25% stake in the ranch in exchange for continued management and a significant but manageable payment plan. It was a staggering opportunity, one that would provide real security for his family. Because by then, Sophia was pregnant, her belly just beginning to swell with their first child, and Xavier found himself planning for a future that extended far beyond his own life. "We are going to need a bigger house," Sophia said one evening as she knitted tiny socks, her hands moving with the same precision she brought to everything she did. "Maybe something with 3 bedrooms, space for a proper nursery, and room to grow." "I have been thinking the same thing," Xavier admitted. "There is land available just outside town near the Fletcher Ranch. We could build something ourselves, exactly what we want." They spent the winter planning and preparing, Xavier working on the land whenever weather permitted, laying foundations and framing walls. Other men from town helped on their days off, a community effort that spoke to the respect both Xavier and Sophia had earned. By the time spring arrived in 1885, the house stood complete, a solid structure with wooden floors, glass windows, and a covered porch that overlooked the canyon. Their daughter was born on a warm April evening, coming into the world with lusty cries that announced her determination to be heard. Xavier held his wife's hand through the labor, feeling utterly helpless as she endured pain he could not take from her. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in his arms, he understood what people meant about instant, overwhelming love. She was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, with Sophia's green eyes and Xavier's dark hair. "What should we name her?" Sophia asked, exhausted but glowing with joy. "I was thinking Margaret after your mother," Xavier said. He had heard all of Sophia's stories about the mother who had died when Sophia was 12, the woman who had encouraged her daughter's education despite societal expectations. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Margaret Rose Gallagher." Parenthood transformed them both in ways neither anticipated. Xavier discovered depths of protectiveness he had not known he possessed, while Sophia somehow managed to balance teaching, running the library, and caring for their daughter with grace that Xavier could only admire. They took turns walking the floor with Margaret when she cried at night, shared the exhaustion and the wonder of watching her grow and change. The library continued to thrive, expanding to offer evening classes in reading, mathematics, and basic business skills. Sophia hired 2 assistants, women from town who needed employment and shared her passion for education. The lending library became a gathering place for the community, somewhere people came not just for books, but for conversation and connection. Xavier's partnership with Tom Fletcher proved equally successful. The ranch prospered under their joint management, supplying beef not just to Eldorado Canyon but to other mining camps throughout the region. Xavier learned quickly, his natural affinity for animals combining with Fletcher's experience to create effective strategies for expansion. By the end of 1885, Xavier had saved enough to buy additional land adjacent to their property, space where he began experimenting with different breeds of cattle better suited to the harsh Nevada climate. On their second wedding anniversary, they had a celebration dinner at their new home, inviting Tom Fletcher, Martha, and several other close friends. Margaret, now 6 months old, sat in a high chair Xavier had built, gumming a piece of bread and laughing at the attention. As Xavier looked around the table at the gathering of people who had become like family, he felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. Later, after everyone had left and Margaret was sleeping, Xavier and Sophia sat together on their porch swing, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about that sketch?" Xavier asked. "Sometimes," Sophia admitted. "I look at it now and then, that terrible drawing Martha made, and I marvel at how something so inadequate led to something so perfect." She turned to face him in the dim light. "You could have chosen any of the women advertising in that paper, Xavier. What made you pick mine? Honestly, I am not entirely sure. Maybe it was the location, Nevada being closer than some of the others. Maybe it was something in the description that resonated with me. Or maybe," he said, pulling her closer, "it was fate or luck or whatever you want to call it when 2 people who need each other somehow find a way together." "I prefer to think it was love," Sophia said. "Not love at first sight, because how could I love a man I had never met? But love in potential, love waiting to happen. The sketch was just the excuse that brought you to me. And the real woman was so much more than I ever imagined," Xavier murmured, kissing her temple. "Every day I discover something new about you. Some new depth, some new strength, some new way you amaze me." "That works both ways," Sophia said. "When you arrived that first day, I thought you were handsome and seemed kind, but I had no idea about the man you truly were. I could not have known about your patience, your integrity, the way you support my dreams even when they complicate your life. I could not have known how good a father you would be, how natural it would come to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the swing creaking gently beneath them. Then Sophia said, "I want to do something with the library, something bigger." "What are you thinking?" "I want to start a scholarship fund for miners' children. A way to help them attend schools back east, universities where they can get real educations and build different lives if they choose. Too many bright children are trapped here because their families cannot afford anything else." Her voice grew passionate in the darkness. "We could change that, Xavier. The library makes enough money now to start small, and if we can get donations from people in town, maybe even from some of the mine owners who have guilty consciences about the working conditions." "That is a wonderful idea," Xavier said. "But are you sure you want to take on more responsibility? With Margaret and your teaching, I think I need to. These children deserve better opportunities. If we can help even one child escape the mines and build a different future, that would mean everything." She paused. "And I have been thinking about cutting back my teaching hours anyway, spending more time with Margaret while she is young. If I hire someone to help run the library full-time, someone I train properly, then I can focus on the scholarship program and on our family." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming, their voices low so as not to wake the baby sleeping inside. This was what Xavier loved most about their marriage, these conversations where they built their future together, where Sophia's vision combined with his practical nature to create something neither could achieve alone. The scholarship fund launched in the spring of 1886, with a fundraising dinner that brought together miners, ranch owners, business people, and even some of the mine executives. Sophia gave a speech that left many people wiping their eyes, talking about the children she taught and their potential, the way education could transform not just individual lives but entire communities. By the end of the evening, they had raised over $300, enough to send their first student east for a year of schooling. That student was Tommy Henderson, the 9-year-old boy whose father had died in the mine collapse. Now 10, and showing exceptional aptitude for mathematics, Tommy would attend a preparatory school in Denver that specialized in engineering. When Sophia told him the news, the boy cried, and so did his mother, thanking Sophia and Xavier over and over until they were both embarrassed by the gratitude. "This is what that sketch was really about," Sophia said to Xavier later. "Not just bringing us together, though I am grateful for that every day, but creating something larger than ourselves, something that helps people and makes the world a little bit better." Their second child arrived in October of 1886, a son they named Samuel after Xavier's father. He came easier than Margaret had, and Xavier held him mere minutes after birth, marveling at how something so small could contain so much possibility. Margaret, now a year and a half old, was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to touch him constantly with gentle, curious fingers. Life settled into a rhythm that was chaotic and exhausting but deeply satisfying. Xavier divided his time between ranch work and helping with the children, becoming expert at changing diapers and preparing bottles when Sophia needed to rest. Sophia reduced her teaching to mornings only, spending afternoons with the children and evenings working on scholarship fund administration. The library continued to grow, moving to a larger space in 1887 and expanding its collection to over 500 books. The scholarship program sent 3 more students to schools back east, and the success stories began trickling back, reports of excellent grades and new opportunities that would have been impossible in Eldorado Canyon. The program's reputation spread throughout Nevada mining country, drawing donations from unexpected sources and establishing Sophia as a force for educational reform. Xavier watched his wife blossom into this role with pride and something like awe. The woman who had placed a desperate advertisement with a faded sketch had become a leader in their community, someone people turned to for guidance and inspiration. Yet she remained the same person he had fallen in love with, still laughing at his jokes, still reaching for his hand when they walked together, still making him feel like the most important person in her world. On a cool evening in November of 1888, 5 years after their wedding, Xavier and Sophia celebrated their anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. The children were staying with Martha for the night, giving them rare time alone. They ate the meal Sophia had prepared, roasted chicken and vegetables from their garden, and talked about everything and nothing, the comfortable conversation of long partnership. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked suddenly. Answering my letter, marrying someone you barely knew. Never, Sophia said without hesitation. Not for a single moment. Do you regret coming to find me based on a terrible sketch? That sketch was the best mistake I ever made, Xavier said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I thought I was choosing a plain schoolteacher who might tolerate me. Instead, I found you, the real you, with all your passion and intelligence and strength. You are so much more than that drawing suggested, more than any drawing could capture. You saw something in that sketch that made you travel all this way, Sophia pointed out. Some quality that spoke to you despite the poor artistry. Maybe you saw what you needed to see. Or maybe I saw a possibility, Xavier said. The possibility of connection, of partnership, of building something meaningful. And you gave me all of that and more. They cleared the dishes together, working in the easy synchronization of people who knew each other's movements, then retired to their bedroom where they made love with the slow tenderness of long familiarity. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Sophia said, I am pregnant again. Xavier's heart leapt. Are you sure? Very sure. I have been to the doctor. The baby should come in early summer. She paused. Are you happy about it? Happy does not begin to cover it, Xavier said, his hand finding her still flat belly. Another child, another person to love. How did I get so lucky? We make our own luck, Sophia said. You chose to answer that advertisement. I chose to respond to your letter. We chose each other, again and again, every day since then. That is not luck, Xavier. That is love. Their third child, a daughter they named Caroline, arrived on a blazing hot day in June of 1889. She had Sophia's chestnut hair and Xavier's blue eyes, and from the start showed a calm temperament that contrasted sharply with her more boisterous siblings. The house rang with children's laughter and occasional tears, with the chaos of family life that Xavier had never imagined he would experience. The decade turned, and with it came new changes. The mines began showing signs of depletion, the easy ore extracted and what remained requiring more expensive techniques to recover. Some smaller operations closed, leading to families leaving Eldorado Canyon for opportunities elsewhere. The town's population declined slowly but steadily, creating concern about the community's future. Xavier and Tom Fletcher responded by diversifying the ranch operations, adding sheep to their cattle and exploring contracts with the railroad for livestock transport to California markets. It required significant investment and risk, but Xavier had learned that standing still meant falling behind. Sophia adapted the library to serve the changing population, adding practical manuals about farming and ranching, offering classes in bookkeeping and business management that helped people adapt to new opportunities. Through it all, their marriage remained the foundation that supported everything else. They fought sometimes, disagreeing about finances or child rearing or the dozens of small decisions that defined daily life, but they always came back together, always remembered what mattered most. On difficult days, Xavier would think back to that faded sketch and marvel at the journey it had started, the life they had built from such unpromising beginnings. By 1892, their oldest children were attending school, Margaret now 7, and showing her mother's academic aptitude, Samuel 5 and obsessed with horses and anything to do with the ranch. Caroline, at 3, followed her siblings everywhere, determined not to be left behind. Xavier built them a larger house on the ranch property, a sprawling structure with 6 bedrooms and a real parlor where Sophia could host library board meetings and scholarship committee gatherings. The scholarship program had sent over 20 students east by then, and several had already completed their educations and begun successful careers as engineers, teachers, accountants, and doctors. They sent letters back to Sophia, crediting her with changing their lives, and she kept every letter in a special box, reading them when she needed reminding about why the work mattered. On a spring evening in 1893, Xavier and Sophia took a rare ride together, just the two of them, leaving the children with a neighbor. They rode up into the canyon, following paths Xavier had learned over the years, until they reached a high point overlooking the valley. From here, they could see their ranch, the town of Eldorado Canyon, the ribbon of the Colorado River cutting through the landscape. 10 years, Sophia said, sitting her horse beside Xavier's. 10 years since you walked into my schoolhouse. The best 10 years of my life, Xavier said. Everything good in my world came from that choice, from seeing that sketch and deciding to take a chance. I look at that sketch sometimes, Sophia admitted. It is in the bottom of my jewelry box, preserved between pieces of cloth. And I think about how terrified I was when I placed that advertisement, how desperate and uncertain. I thought I was at the end of options, that advertising for a husband was admitting defeat. And instead it was the beginning of everything. Not just marriage and children, though I treasure those more than I can say, but the life we have built together, the work we do, the difference we make. I could never have done any of it alone, Xavier. You made it all possible. We made it possible, Xavier corrected. Together. That is what partnership means. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began setting, painting the canyon in shades of gold and crimson. Then Sophia said, "Do you think people understand? When they see those advertisements, those mail-order bride notices, do they understand the potential in them? The way a faded sketch can lead to true love? I think most people see desperation and judge it," Xavier said honestly. They do not understand that sometimes desperation is just another word for courage. It takes courage to admit you need help, to put yourself out there knowing you might be rejected or mocked. You had that courage, and I am grateful for it every day. You had courage too, Sophia pointed out. Traveling to meet a woman you knew only from a letter and a terrible drawing. That was brave. Or foolish, Xavier said with a grin. Maybe both. But if foolishness leads to a life like this, then I recommend it to everyone. They rode back to the ranch as darkness fell, racing each other like children, laughing as their horses thundered across the valley floor. When they arrived home, breathless and exhilarated, they found all 3 children still awake, demanding to know where they had been and what they had done. Xavier scooped Caroline up in his arms while Margaret and Samuel clung to Sophia, and they all went inside together, a complete family. The years continued passing, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The scholarship program expanded to include girls, after Sophia argued passionately that females deserved educational opportunities equal to males. The ranch prospered even as the mines continued declining, proving Xavier's instinct about diversification correct. Their children grew taller and more independent, developing personalities and passions that sometimes amazed their parents. In 1895, now in their mid-30s, Xavier and Sophia discussed their future over coffee one quiet morning. The children were at school, the house temporarily peaceful, and they sat at their kitchen table with the easy comfort of long companionship. "I have been thinking about writing a book," Sophia said, "about education in mining communities, the challenges and opportunities. Maybe about the scholarship program and what we have learned." "You should," Xavier said immediately. "You have knowledge people need, experiences worth sharing." "It would take time away from other things," Sophia warned. "Time I currently spend with the children or on library work." Then we adapt, Xavier said simply. The children are more independent now, and the library runs smoothly with your assistance. If this is important to you, we will make it work. This was what their marriage had become, Xavier realized. Not the passionate intensity of their early years, though that still flared at times, but something deeper and more sustainable. They were partners in the truest sense, each supporting the other's dreams, each willing to sacrifice for the relationship they had built together. Sophia did write her book, working on it in early mornings and late evenings, her pen scratching across paper as she captured a decade of experience and insight. Xavier read each chapter as she completed it, offering suggestions and encouragement, marveling at her ability to transform their shared experiences into something universal and profound. The book was published in 1897 by a small press in San Francisco, and while it never became a bestseller, it found an audience among educators and reformers throughout the West. Sophia received letters from teachers in mining camps from Arizona to Montana, thanking her for validating their work and providing practical strategies for serving their students. The recognition pleased her, but what mattered most was knowing she had contributed something lasting, something that would continue helping children long after she was gone. Their 20th anniversary arrived in 1903, and Xavier planned a surprise for his wife. He arranged for the children, now nearly grown, to stay with friends, then took Sophia on a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation in all their years of marriage. They stayed in a modest hotel, attended the theater, dined in restaurants where other people did the cooking, and simply enjoyed being together without the constant demands of work and family. On their last evening in the city, they walked along the waterfront, watching ships come and go from the harbor. Sophia held Xavier's arm, and he felt the warmth of her presence beside him, as essential as breathing. "You remember the Chronicle offices?" Xavier asked. "That is where I first saw your advertisement. I bought the paper from a vendor on this very street." "I remember writing that advertisement," Sophia said. "Sitting at my desk in the schoolhouse, trying to find words that would attract a decent man without sounding desperate. I must have written 20 drafts before settling on what I sent." "And the sketch, how did that come about?" Martha insisted. She said men needed something visual, that words alone would not be enough. "She worked so hard on that drawing, Xavier. She truly tried her best. But her talents lay elsewhere, and what emerged was that faded, inadequate thing that somehow brought you to me." "Nothing inadequate about it," Xavier said. "It did exactly what it needed to do. It brought us together." They stood watching the water as fog began rolling in from the ocean, the temperature dropping as evening deepened into night. After a while, Sophia said, "If we could go back and do it differently, would you? If you could have seen a perfect sketch or a photograph, would you have chosen differently?" "Never," Xavier said firmly. "The imperfection of that sketch made me look beyond surface appearance, made me focus on the words of your advertisement instead. And those words revealed who you truly were. Someone intelligent and brave, someone willing to take risks for the life she wanted. That is what I fell in love with, not a face in a drawing." "I fell in love with your honesty," Sophia said. "Your letter did not promise wealth or status, did not make grand declarations or try to impress me with exaggerations. You just told me the truth about who you were and what you wanted. In a world full of men who lie and boast, that honesty was like water in the desert." They returned to Eldorado Canyon refreshed and reconnected, diving back into their lives with renewed energy. The children were pursuing their own paths now. Margaret, 18, was attending the University of California on one of her mother's scholarships, studying to become a doctor. Samuel, 16, worked full-time on the ranch, showing natural talent for animal husbandry and business management that suggested he would take over operations someday. Caroline, 14, had her mother's passion for teaching and her father's practical nature, a combination that would serve her well in whatever she chose to pursue. The scholarship program celebrated its 20th anniversary in 1906, having sent over 100 students to colleges and universities throughout the country. Sophia organized a reunion, bringing together as many scholarship recipients as could attend, and Xavier watched with pride as his wife stood before the gathering, accepting their gratitude and celebrating their achievements. She had done this, he thought. That desperate schoolteacher with the faded sketch had changed hundreds of lives, had created opportunities where none existed, had proven that education and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. That evening, after all the guests had departed and they were alone in their bedroom, Xavier pulled Sophia close. "You amaze me," he said simply. "Every day in ways both large and small, you amaze me." "We amaze each other," Sophia corrected. "That is the secret, I think. Never taking each other for granted, never assuming we know everything about the other person. After all these years, you still surprise me, Xavier Gallagher." "Good," he said, kissing her deeply. "I never want to stop surprising you." They made love with the passion of people who knew each other's bodies intimately, but still found wonder in the connection, still discovered new depths in familiar pleasures. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Xavier thought about that young cowboy who had climbed off a stagecoach 23 years earlier, nervous and hopeful, carrying a newspaper with a faded sketch. That man had been looking for companionship, for someone to share his life with, for an end to loneliness. He had found all that and so much more. The years continued rolling forward, bringing grandchildren as Margaret married a fellow doctor and started a family, as Samuel found love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Caroline attended normal school and returned to teach in Eldorado Canyon, eventually taking over the library operations from her mother. The scholarship program grew into an endowed fund that would continue indefinitely, Sophia's legacy guaranteed to outlive her. Xavier and Sophia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing but their partnership as strong as ever. They took walks together each evening when weather permitted, holding hands like young lovers, talking about their day and their dreams and the grandchildren who brought such joy to their lives. Xavier retired from active ranch management, turning operations over to Samuel while remaining available for advice and consultation. Sophia finally gave up teaching entirely, devoting her time to writing and to the library foundation she had established. On a warm evening in the spring of 1915, 32 years after that first meeting, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. They were in their 50s now, weathered by years of hard work and desert sun, but still vital, still engaged with life. Sophia leaned against Xavier's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the familiar rightness of her body against his. "I found something today," Sophia said, going through old papers in the library archives. "What was it?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of newspaper. The original advertisement, the one with the sketch. Someone had kept it all these years, donated it to the library collection as a historical artifact. Xavier took the paper carefully, unfolding it to reveal the faded image he had not seen in decades. The sketch was even worse than he remembered, barely recognizable as human, much less as his wife. But looking at it now, he felt a rush of tenderness for that crude drawing and what it represented. "Terrible artwork," he said with a smile. "The worst," Sophia agreed, "but it brought me the love of my life. It brought me everything I have now, all because you saw something in that faded sketch worth pursuing." "I saw hope," Xavier said. "I saw possibility. And I saw a woman brave enough to ask for what she wanted, even when the world said it was shameful or desperate. That bravery drew me more than any perfect portrait could have." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the canyon, as stars emerged one by one in the vast desert sky. 3 decades of marriage, Xavier thought. 3 decades of loving the same woman, of building a life together, of creating something meaningful from uncertain beginnings. The faded sketch had been just the starting point, the excuse that brought them together, but what followed was so much richer and more complex than any drawing could capture. "I love you," Sophia said softly. "I have loved you for 32 years, and I will love you for however many more we have." "I love you too," Xavier replied, pulling her closer. "More than I loved you yesterday, less than I will love you tomorrow. That is what I realized years ago. That love is not static, not something that reaches a peak and then maintains. It grows and changes, deepening with time if you tend it properly." "We have tended it well," Sophia said. "We have," Xavier agreed. They sat together until the night grew cold, then went inside to the warmth of their home, to the bed they had shared for over 3 decades, to the love that had grown from a faded sketch into something vast and enduring. And Xavier sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that terrible drawing, for the woman brave enough to place it in a newspaper, for the impulse that made him choose her advertisement among all the others. Because the cowboy who had picked her from that faded sketch had discovered that the real woman was infinitely more than he had imagined, and loving her had been the greatest adventure of his life.